Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third part of our Engage VI Environmental Town Hall series. The theme of tonight's convening is Reimagine St. Croix, a vision for healthy people, thriving economies, and a sustainable environment. My name is Jonathan Williams, and I'm a program officer for the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development. In a moment, we'll get started. I just wanted to go ahead and give you a general housekeeping for this evening. So we'll begin with an introduction and welcome from Deanna James, and then who's the president of the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development. And then we'll hear remarks from Jennifer Valulis, the executive director of the St. Croix Environmental Association. And then we'll hear additional remarks, and then we will switch to a panel. And then from the panel, we will go on to an audience Q&A. And we've reserved about 45 minutes for this Q&A because we really want to give the community an opportunity to speak with the stakeholders that we have present this evening. A reminder, if you could please keep yourself on mute if you are not speaking. And also for questions this evening, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom window, there's a Q&A function. If the audience could just please place their Q&A there. We will be monitoring the chat as well, but it's best if we can monitor it from the Q&A. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, we'll also be monitoring the questions that are placed below the live feed. So thank you all for joining this evening, and I'll turn it over now to Deanna James.
Thank you, Jonathan, and once again, welcome. I want to start off by just offering very sincere thank you to all of our community stakeholders, policymakers, civic partners who've been with us throughout the past 3 months, supporting our advocacy. You all know who you are. You also know that advocacy is hard work and social change is hard work. And so we're deeply appreciative of your engagement and look forward to ongoing partnerships in the weeks and months ahead. I feel confident that history will confirm that we were on the right side of this moment. As we close out this town hall series, I want to also extend a very special thank you to my team, my incredible team, and our nonprofit consortium partners. You all are warriors. I'm privileged to breathe clean air with you. I'm privileged to do this work with you. So thank you so much for all your dedication over the past several months and years. But the fact remains that for many of us Crucians, the past 6 months have been deja vu. We've been here before, in fact, almost 10 years ago, immediately following the closure of Hovenza in 2012. The foundation, anticipating the road ahead, wherein nonprofits would have to dig deep to support our community with greater needs and fewer resources, began convening the community. In conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce, we began convening community stakeholders in earnest, hosting economic roundtables to assess the whole-scale impact of the closure and to better understand residents' concerns and needs. We organized 8 roundtables, assembling over 50 St. Croix residents from all sectors: private small businesses, supermarket owners, school administrators, EDC beneficiaries, government agents, nonprofit leaders, and rank and file residents. One of the things that surprised us most as we undertook this comprehensive community scan was how resolved residents were back in 2012 to accept that the refinery was part of St. Croix's past. In fact, despite the incredible economic uncertainty about the future, there was real consensus around residents' readiness to move into progressive, post-refining, clean energy future. It was actually quite astonishing that as policymakers were panicking about not having an economic backup plan, desperately searching for a new buyer for Hovenza, we noted that a majority of the residents we convened had repressed years of conflicted feelings about the refinery. While it had brought jobs and economic growth, the environmental and real consequential health impacts represented a huge part of the complicated relationship that Crucians have had with the refinery and many of the other heavy industry sites on the island of St. Croix. Overwhelmingly, our participants in the roundtables were excited about the prospect of working with government to envision something radically different than heavy industry for the future of St. Croix, something that was healthier, more holistic, and inarguably more sustainable. From these roundtables, we developed some broad recommendations based on the ideas and input from our participants, including several who had personally and successfully supported local governments stateside in navigating similar economic upheavals. We shared those recommendations with policymakers, and then we waited, and we waited. And in the end, despite having 7 years to consider alternative economic paths, when all was said and done, our policymakers defaulted to the same economic strategy, which was the source of so much of the current economic and environmental challenges we're facing. To say that the lack of vision and courage has been the most frustrating aspect of this crisis for me is an understatement. But on a very personal note, over the past 4 months, I've done a lot of deep thinking. I've thought about my ancestors who made the courageous and resolved decision to reject European imperialism by fighting for and winning their freedom. I've thought about my brothers and sisters in the independent islands of the Caribbean who on one courageous night went to sleep resolute in their decision to be free, then woke up the next morning and voted for colonial independence, come what may. All sought self-determination and liberation from colonialism, and all made incredible sacrifices to achieve their vision. Ultimately, vision demands courage and audacity and sacrifice and confidence. And tonight we want to welcome a courageous coalition of the willing into our virtual circle to join us in not just talking about a just vision for the future of St. Croix, but to commit to engaging with our partners and our policymakers to demand it and to build it. You can rest assured that as we close out this series, the foundation and our nonprofits are deeply committed to doing everything in our power to support and to cultivate the kind of civic engagement that will never settle for anything less than a progressive and equitable social and economic opportunity for our people and from our policymakers. I close out really while we're, this town hall is the end of the series, it is the beginning of the next step of the work, which demands full engagement from the community. And so while we'll spend some time together, the real work begins after this series closes out. I want to turn the mic over to Jennifer to offer some words, and thank you once again for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Deanna. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Valulis, the Executive Director of the St. Croix Environmental Association. I'd like to welcome all of our panelists tonight, our special invited guests, but especially the St. Croix community members to the third town hall in our series. When we started planning these town halls many months ago, I think that we were all especially looking forward and have been especially excited for this particular one because we are talking about solutions tonight. We can talk about moving forward and hopefulness. We can look at real achievable options for a St. Croix where the health, livelihood, and survival of our neighbors and friends does not have to be sacrificed for jobs, where we have resiliency and diversity in our economy so a single entity does not have the power to force us to choose between jobs and the health of thousands of residents. In short, we are asking you all to reimagine a St. Croix where we have healthy people, thriving economies, and a sustainable environment. We don't have to choose between these options. We can have them all, and we have the right to demand it. As Deanna mentioned, we are at a unique point in time where the stars have kind of aligned to put St. Croix at a crucial turning point at the same time that the federal government has finally recognized and committed to supporting environmental justice communities. That is, communities such as ours that are predominantly Black and Brown, that have borne the burden of shortened lifespans, high cancer risk, increased respiratory diseases like asthma, and many other issues, all from their proximity to major polluters. At this point in time, there are unprecedented opportunities for communities to make these changes towards reclaiming their health and adding jobs. I'm really looking forward to hearing about many of these opportunities tonight from our panelists and hearing about the already existing initiatives that are well situated to jumpstart this transition. and then furthering our conversations about them in the coming weeks. So again, thank you all for your participation in this community event. And before I hand it off to our next speaker, I also want to acknowledge the many people that have helped plan these town halls. There's a tremendous amount of considered thought that goes into every aspect, not to mention the technical details that keep things flowing smoothly. So in addition to the hosts that you see today, I'd like to thank Jonathan Williams, Essence Carter, Victoria Gonzalez, Monica Marin, and Kemenabon Lewis for their very hard work in making this town hall happen. So next up, before we start with our panelist discussion, we do have a quick update on Lime Tree status from Walter Mugden, the Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2. Walter, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thanks to the St. Croix Foundation and the other groups that have pulled this together. It's very, very useful. So as everybody knows, on May 14th, EPA issued an emergency shutdown order to Lime Tree Bay because of the multiple excess emissions incidents over 3 months. On May 21, the company announced that it would remain closed indefinitely because the current investors are unwilling to put more money into the facility. We understand that the company may be looking for new investors. It's not for EPA to say how likely or unlikely that is, but it's our obligation to be ready in the event that new investors show up and want to continue to operate or start to operate the facility again. As a reminder, under the Federal Clean Air Act, the emergency order we issued had a maximum duration of 60 days, unless during that time we filed a lawsuit in federal court. The 60th day was July 13th, and so on July 12th, we did file such a lawsuit. Simultaneously, we filed a legally binding agreement with Lime Tree called a stipulation, in which the company agreed not to restart any operations without providing us with at least 90 days advance notice, and also agreed to provide us at that time with a detailed plan addressing all of the necessary corrective measures. And we will not allow the refinery to restart without our advance approval. But because the refinery will now be shut down indefinitely, and it could be a long time, or it could be forever, we don't know, it is now essential that the company carry out long-term shutdown activities. Specifically, they have to remove all the remaining hydrocarbons from the piping and the process units at the refinery. The first step in preparing for this long-term shutdown work is scheduled to take place day after tomorrow, Saturday, July 31st. But this first step involves starting and testing each of the 10 pilot lights on flare number 8. That's the big flare there. And they're going to use only propane for the tests. That's the same as what you might use in a home barbecue. Testing the flare will help ensure that the repairs that they've been doing were properly done and that the flare can be operated safely and effectively during the long-term shutdown operations, which will follow later. The flare testing work is expected to take just one day, just Saturday, and it will take place during daytime hours only. Lime Tree has shared with us detailed information about the flare repairs that were done as recommended by the independent audit that was carried out pursuant to our May 14th order. EPA has also carefully reviewed Lime Tree's plan for testing the flare with propane. And by the way, I note that this plan is posted on our website. During the time that the flare is being tested, EPA will be operating our 5 air monitoring stations to measure for H2S and SO2. We'll post information about any exceedances on our website, our Lime Tree website, and we'll alert the company, the VIDPNR, and the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. That's the same as what we were doing previously when we started monitoring back in May. And by the way, many of you probably already know that the H2S exceedances that we have occasionally registered on our monitors, at least since May 26th, have most likely been from a nearby sewer main. And last week, we entered into an administrative consent order with the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority, which operates the sewer system, to address those sewer line problems. Looking ahead, Lime Tree will be sending us a detailed plan for the actual purging of the hydrocarbons from the refinery piping and process units. As I mentioned already, that work is critically important. It's necessary to properly secure the facility for the long term. We expect that this plan will be submitted next week, and Limetree will not begin any of the purging work until EPA has reviewed and approved the plan. And I note that this long-term shutdown process is expected to take quite a few months. EPA has also required that Limetree acquire SO2 and H2S monitors of its own, but it'll take a few more weeks for them to be delivered and installed. Once we authorize the actual purging of hydrocarbons to start, EPA will again operate our own monitors during the period before Limetree's monitors are installed and during an additional period thereafter in order to confirm that the company's monitors are operating properly. And finally, just to clarify, all of what I've said applies to the refinery facility. The adjacent terminal facility is not the subject of these actions. So there's a short update on what's going on.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for that update. We are really glad that you could join us and give us that information. My name is Frandel Gerard, and I'm going to act as the moderator. We are going to move into the panel discussion, and I would like to ask Mr. Administrator Mugden, Nathaniel Smith, Wayne Biggs, and Sydney Paul to activate your video. And for those who are not engaged in this section of the panel, if you could just stop your video. Just to frame what we intend to do, first, good night to all the panelists and all who are online listening. What we are envisioning is something new for St. Croix. And what we're hoping that we can get to is not just the vision, but implementation. And we understand that that is going to take some time. But we can envision a St. Croix where clean and renewable energy is what's used by the majority of the population, where recycling and composting is an everyday activity, where research and technology drives new development and supporting agriculture, healthcare, and other sustainable industries, where our health and our environment are not under attack from heavy industry and high levels of single-use plastics and other items. So to start the discussion, I'd like to ask everyone to just briefly introduce themselves. Walter, we know who you are. Nathaniel?
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to participate in this panel. My name is Nathaniel Smith, and I have the honor of serving as the founder and chief equity officer of the Partnership for Southern Equity. PSC works to advance a new Southern agenda for racial equity and shared prosperity, and we do a lot of our racial equity efforts within the context of energy and climate issues, economy, growth, and opportunity.
Thank you. And Wayne Biggs?
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me on. I'm Wayne Biggs Jr. I'm the CEO of the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, and I'm going to say the author, but I'm not really the author. I'm the stakeholder of Vision 2040 for the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. And Ms. Sydney Paul?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sydney Paul. I am the Senior Manager of Business Intelligence and Marketing at the UVI Research and Technology Park. The RT Park, as we call it, is also an economic development organization. However, we focus on tech and knowledge-based business attraction, retention, and expansion. And we look at that through 3 pillars. So there's business attraction, finding interesting and relevant tech and knowledge-based companies from abroad to establish business here. but we also look at entrepreneurship building. So finding and nurturing tech entrepreneurs from the Virgin Islands, and then also workforce development. So finding tech job opportunities in the territory for Virgin Islanders who have skills and expertise in STEM to bring them back home. So that's what we do. And a lot of the work that we also do focuses a lot on sustainable practices using technology.
Thank you so much. So as we begin this conversation, we'd like to frame it in, with the theme of the town hall front and center. And I'd like to ask each of you to give us your response to, your thoughts about, can this concept be realized, and what type of impact do you see it having on the citizens of St. Croix as we move forward with the visioning and planning centered around sustainable development? Should I call on people, or Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to go first in reference to that, Frondel, if you'd like. I mean, as we were developing Vision 2040, and Vision 2040 is a 20-year economic vision for the territory. For those of you not familiar with it, I would invite you to go to usvi2040.com and look at the plan here. We were trying to plan a 20-year economic plan, visionary plan, in regard to how we diversify the economy. Not taking into account the refinery, not taking into account the level of tourism we have currently. And what we did is we defined basically 8 goals, and we looked at 8 growth industries that we think that we can use to diversify the economy if we follow the plan and move the plan forward. So that's really what Vision 2040 is, and it's a way to diversify the economy. Not necessarily getting less tourist dollars, but making tourism a smaller portion of the percentage of the economic revenues that we generate. So again, we identified 8 target industries that we think has growth potential. And I think it fits well into the conversation we're having tonight in regard to those. And we'll go in a little further as we discuss.
Thank you so much. And Nathaniel?
So, I would not definitely frame it as should it happen. I would say that it must happen. And that the voices of community must be in a position of influence as it relates to the built environment and what comes out of the development. While a great deal of our work at PSC focuses on the domestic South, the history of structural racism and extreme extraction is consistent in terms of its effects on St. Croix, as well as communities of color, in particular Black communities in the American South, or in the domestic South. And so from that has come a great deal of trauma, not only trauma that has affected our planet, but also trauma that has affected the people. And with a development that will occur not only in a sustainable way, but a regenerative way, you all will have an opportunity to ensure that the trauma that was caused by this type of extractive development, the extractive utilization of fossil fuels, and extractive utilization of labor, will finally be in a position to heal as opposed to take. And so now I think we're entering into a time where we need more developments and economic opportunities that are healing opportunities for communities. And I think this provides an exceptional opportunity for this to happen in St. Croix.
Thank you so much. Walter, would you like to weigh in on this?
Sure, and thank you. So the federal government, EPA, is not in the primary role of suggesting how the economy or how the economy of the Virgin Islands or of St. Croix should be developed. That is really entirely up to the residents and citizens of the Virgin Islands. That being said, it is clear, there's really no doubt whatsoever, that climate change is real and it is upon us. The United Nations has called climate change the defining issue of our time, regarding which we are currently at the defining moment. And we all understand it, that the only way to try to minimize or reduce or mitigate the effects of climate change that we know are going to happen is to wean ourselves away from fossil fuel and move towards a carbon neutral or carbon negative economy. If we are able to do that, and it is absolutely essential that we can, and that we must, if we're able to do it, then for the long term, it may be that your conclusion is a refinery wouldn't be the right choice for your community anyhow. Again, EPA has to prepare for the possibility that the refinery, that somebody might step forward and say, hey, we want to operate that, and we'll be ready for that, and we'll do the very best we can to make, if that should ever happen, to make it happen in a safe and protective way. But really, in the long term, the future does not lie with fossil fuels. The future lies with renewable and sustainable energy.
Thank you. And Sydney?
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, when I have these conversations about what the future of the VI looks like, particularly St. Croix, I think about how, for instance, Mr. Biggs talks about how tourism is such a big part of our economy right now. And considering our tourism relies a lot on our natural resources and, you know, promoting our beaches, promoting our rainforests, promoting our, you know, animals and things like that, reef snorkeling, things like that. It would seem that your community would keep that as a priority in terms of just how you take care of it, right? And you know, if we rely so much on tourism right now, I think that we should be thinking about how to sustainably keep that industry going, as well as, like I agree with Mr. Biggs, just making more of a balance in terms of our economy and what industries we rely upon. If we can sort of level the playing field or at least diversify it a little bit, we'll be in a much better position. And then from the RT Park standpoint as well, technology is a really great way to do that. So a lot of the businesses and trends that we look at are in clean energy, are in solar energy, wave energy, you know, thinking about ways to use technology to make farming more efficient for our local farmers so that they can compete better in terms of commercial farming so that we're more sustainable. So we definitely agree that a sustainable future for the VI is what is needed. It's not necessarily a question of if, it's a question of when and how we do it, because it must be done. So yeah, I think it's a conversation. This conversation we're having tonight is absolutely necessary.
You're on mute, Fernando.
Thank you. Diversification of the economy has been sort of that thing that every politician over the last 30 years has spoken to, and somehow, you know, we have yet to really effectuate that. So clearly the time is now. And in that, you know, and Walter, I'm going to put you on a hot spot, but and we understand this is theoretical. We're not talking site specific, but one of the things that we've investigated is the declaration of a site as a Superfund site, and the potential short-term and long-term economic impact, positive economic impact, that the reclamation of a site can have in a community. We'd like to know if you could share some information on that program, the Superfund program, and what the component parts are, the process, with a slight, with some information on the jobs training initiative that's a part of Superfund, of the Superfund program.
Sure. So it'll take just a couple of minutes, and I hope that's okay. So Superfund is one of two major programs that EPA uses to clean up severely contaminated hazardous waste sites. The other one is the Corrective Action Program under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA as it's called. The two programs apply the same cleanup standards. But the major difference is that RCRA corrective action is typically used for active operating facilities that manage hazardous waste. And Superfund is typically used for facilities or sites that are no longer operating or are abandoned, or where the source of contamination is unknown. So the St. Croix refinery has been subject to RCRA corrective action cleanup requirements since the time it was operated by Hovenza. And as part of the Hovenza bankruptcy, a separate entity named the Hovenza Environmental Response Trust was created and was funded to continue the cleanup work. And that work continues today by the trust. They are doing it every day, day in and day out. And since the start of the corrective action work way back in the 1980s, more than 44.5 million gallons of petroleum hydrocarbons, that's right, 44.5 million gallons, have been pumped out of the ground beneath the refinery. And this represents recovery of an estimated 99% of all the oil that was believed to have been released into the ground through slow leaks and other spills since the refinery began operations in 1966. The continued pumping, by the way, also prevents the oil contamination from migrating outside the facility footprint. It keeps it contained. So Superfund is the other major federal hazardous waste site cleanup program. Superfund will generally not be used at sites where there is corrective action underway. That's a general statement. But the Superfund process, if it's invoked, starts with a preliminary assessment and a site inspection. And these are designed to determine whether a site presents an unacceptable risk to human health or the environment, and what other cleanup mechanisms, if any, are available. The next step is that the site gets evaluated using EPA's, what's called EPA's hazard ranking system. And this generates a numerical score that's intended to reflect the level of risk posed by the site. And if the score happens to be 28.5 or higher, the site is eligible to be added to EPA's national priorities list of Superfund sites, although that doesn't mean it necessarily will be. It just means that the site is eligible. So to put it in context, since the start of the Superfund program 40 years ago, some 47,000 sites nationwide have been assessed. Of those, a total of 1,813 have been placed on the national priorities list. Now, as a matter of longstanding policy dating all the way back to the 1980s, EPA does not place sites on the national priorities list unless the state or territory in which the site is located requests that we put it on the list. It's not a matter of law, that's a matter of policy. If and when a site does get on the list, then there are detailed studies to determine the nature and extent of contamination, the level of risk posed to human health and the environment, and the various alternatives for how to address those risks and remediate the site. At the end of that process, EPA proposes a cleanup plan and takes public comment on the proposal. And after considering all those comments, EPA publishes a final decision about the cleanup. I would note that both the RCRA Corrective Action Program and Superfund use the polluter pays principle, which means that the companies responsible for creating the problem are also responsible for cleaning it up and paying for the cleanup. But if no such companies can be found, or if they no longer exist, or if they have no funds, then the Superfund itself, which is to say the federal fund in the name Superfund, the federal Superfund can pay 90% of the cleanup costs, and the state or territory is required to pay the remaining 10%. I hope that begins to answer the question that you had, Brenda.
That does kind of contextualize it for us. I had a follow-up, and it went out of my head, so I needed my little pen and paper to take notes. But I'm sure we'll come back to you on that. I think one of the things that we were looking at is, a shut down site does not have to stay vacant and occupied and abandoned for a period of years to be able to get into that process. I think that was our we wanted to understand that context and share that in the community. So I'm sure more questions will come. And with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Biggs. We've referred in a number of our town halls and conversations, and you tonight mentioned Vision 2040, which was a visioning process. What are the next steps now that the vision has been laid out? What are the next steps for the EDA in terms of using that document and framing future development initiatives?
Yeah, let me just back up just quickly. And as I indicate, I'm the caretaker of this plan, but this plan is really a community plan. As you know, Frandel and some of the panelists here, the plan was really created from community input. So it's the community's plan, and we're just trying to move this plan forward. So the target industries we identified are growth industries, but also points us in the direction that the community indicated they wanted it to go in. So the next step is really starting to implement that. And earlier today, I had a discussion with the governor, and pretty soon he's going to announce a task force to begin implementation of the plan and moving us towards these 8 target industries that we see for growth. And if I can just take a quick overview of those industries, it's agribusiness, coastal and ocean resources, health sciences, light manufacturing, professional and technical services, renewable energy, research and development, and then VI style tourism that includes heritage, cultural, sports, adventure, and wellness. So we're trying to move away from just a standard type of tourism and really give the people that come to visit us an experience here while here in the territory. So again, the next step is just moving towards implementation, and we're working towards that right now.
And is there a timeline on that? I mean, he's going to make that announcement, and then have you got a timeline in terms of how much?
Well,
time
again, this is the 20-year visionary plan. I mean, we're hoping to get there at the end of 20 years, realizing that as things change, we may have to pivot and move. For instance, if we had a 20-year vision prior to COVID, we would probably have to pivot and move a little as a result of things happening in COVID. But yeah, I mean, I think more and more individuals are getting on board in reference to the plan. We hear people talking about the plan regularly. I'm actually traveling with some of the senators, and we're talking, how do we move this plan forward? So we expect that the plan in the very near future, you're going to see things start to align as we move toward this plan. So for instance, we're talking to the education department, how do you gear your curriculum to various things? We're talking to UVI, we're talking to the Department of Labor in reference to workforce development. So we're trying to lay the bricks down so we can travel the road. So that's where we are right now. And again, it's going to be a little while before we get to the final area, but I think you're going to see things start to move within the next, 3 to 6 months. You'll see the task force moving and trying to implement more and more this vision and getting it out in the public more and more.
Thank you. I know one of the things as the planning was happening, it's the framing, how it's put together. And one of my concerns is the attention to the underserved, the attention to the traditionally, historically disadvantaged communities, where the plan is up here at the 10,000 foot level, but down here on the ground, besides, job training, that level of empowerment and, conversation about economic equity and economic justice and environmental justice. Are we looking at infusing the future iterations of this plan with that lens?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we are, and that's why we wanted to be community-based, and we took a lot of effort not only to survey the residents of the territory, the businesses of the territory, but we also went to Virgin Islands and the diaspora. So we try to get a real full background in regard to how do we move everybody forward with this plan. And the tagline of the plan is really prosperity for all, so we're trying to encompass everyone here in the territory and move everybody to lift everybody up a little bit and move us along the chain. So I think people can fit in all areas throughout the plan. And I didn't go into the specifics within each area, but I kind of gave just a broad overview of the industry. But I mean, I can talk in reference to, for instance, renewable energy. We talk about solar, wind, tidal, biomass, waste. I mean, there's a variety of different things under each industry area that we can speak about. And it runs again from agriculture to really the high tech, for agro-tech, professional and technical services to tie in with the RT Park and Sydney's area over there. So we're looking at this really very, very broadly and trying to really uplift everybody here in the territory.
Thanks. Sydney, if you could perhaps give us, your sense of how the RT Park is moving in community, how the RT Park is mobilizing young people and attracting young Virgin Islanders back in the tech area. If you could share a little bit about the work that's happening and some of the partners at RT Park or clients, specifically those that are working on health or environment or some other sustainable development initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. So what's been really exciting about working for the RT Park for almost 2.5 years is that a lot of the staff and team that that I work with now came on around the same time as me, including our executive director, Peter Chapman. And bringing everybody on board at that time, at the end of 2018, we decided to look at the mandate that created the RT Park through legislation and just take a step back and see, well, really, what has the RT Park been doing and what should we be doing if there are any gaps, right? And we found some. So interestingly enough, part of the RT Park's mandate, on top of doing business attraction for tech and knowledge-based companies, is also to promote business attraction for agriculture research companies. And we have gone beyond to expand that to sustainable development as well. So a lot of our sector focus has been in those areas. We have targeted sectors right now. So there's fintech, more kind of standard and familiar areas of technology, but then there's also health and life sciences, biotech, as well as agriculture research and ag tech, like Mr. Biggs was saying. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the territory for us to leverage those areas for really being a ground of research and innovation for those things, because I think that our location just provides a really great place for that. So we've been doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of focusing on those industries that we think can not only just bring more industry here, but also provide solutions to a lot of the challenges that we see. And in that same lens, which has been really exciting for me, is also in our mandate, we are charged with workforce development and entrepreneurship promotion. So 2 of our really big programs right now, we launched in the last 2 years, and it's been a really busy past 2 years. So the first one that we launched was Accelerate VI. That is our tech startup accelerator program. And basically what an accelerator is a program that helps early stage startups kind of help them mold and scale their businesses by providing them with mentorship opportunities, fundraising guidance, things like that. So we've gone through 2 cohorts of that. 14 startups have gone through that program already in the past 2 years. We also have a pre-accelerator program for earlier stage businesses, and those are geared specifically for Virgin Islanders. The main accelerator program, we also gear towards majority Virgin Islanders, but it's also open to the Caribbean region, because we understand that a lot of the innovators in our region are experiencing the same challenges that we are. So if we can leverage that and have those collaborative opportunities, we want to take advantage of that. And then also, I mean, internationally, but we get a lot of domestic startups from the mainland as well. But of those startups, the 14 that we've had, I think about 10 or 11 of them have been from the Virgin Islands. So it's been interesting to see how many really talented, creative Virgin Islanders, young and old, who've come through the program, and they've been here. It's not necessarily like we've been, trying to attract from away to bring back, which is something we're also doing. But we also have to remember that there's a lot of talent that's still here. A lot of talent who, like I said earlier, we experience all these challenges in terms of the economy, in terms of environment, in terms of trying to figure out how we live sustainably moving forward. We experience those things every day. So why not be the leaders looking for those solutions? And for us, that's through technology. So we launched an application for our third cohort of Accelerate VI on Wednesday. The applications are open till the end of the month, and we're really excited to see the new cohort. We usually accept between 5 to 7, 8 startups for each cohort. And then the second program, which is one of my babies, along with Amina Salim, who's our chief of staff, is Vista Plus, which is our Virgin Islands STEM talent archive. And really that is our workforce development initiative. And that was born actually out of us having conversations with tech businesses who've come to the territory. And one of the first questions they ask us is, well, we want to hire locally. Is there the workforce to support the needs that we have? And at the same time, when I started working at the RT Park, I had only been home for a couple of years. I had moved from the States back home, and I realized that a lot of my peers within my generation were eager to move back home, but they just weren't seeing the job opportunities that were there. So we realized that there was some miscommunication between the two. They weren't hearing or seeing each other. And we decided to create an online job search platform to connect Virgin Islanders who work in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, with opportunities in the territory to work back home. So it's reversing the brain drain. There's a retention in that, talent attraction coming back home in that. And then at the same time, we're hoping that platform can be a database and data, so we can look at, well, if there are a lot of people working in clean energy, if there are a lot of people working in coding and software development, if there are people working in, financial technology and cryptocurrency, well, we want to know where those Virgin Islanders are and how can we leverage those Virgin Islanders to help us provide solutions back home. And that's some really important data to have, and we want everybody to be able to have access to that data. So that's what we've been working on. It's been a very, very busy couple of years, and the Vista Plus platform is live. So we're encouraging Virgin Islanders here and abroad to register whether or not you're looking for a job. And the platform is open to any company within the territory to place their job openings for those in the STEM field. And the last thing that I'll say is that I think that a really important part of what we're doing also is to show people that in technology, it's H3 jobs. So that's high skill, high demand, high wage jobs. And it can seem very intimidating and very technical, but it doesn't have to be. The great thing about technology is that it's an equal opportunity provider, which means that, you can learn coding by yourself on YouTube, or, there are really short programs and boot camps that allow you to do that. We've been working on an adult boot camp. We have had a summer boot camp for the youth last year that went really well. So there are a lot of entry points to come into technology and make good money and have a good quality of life back home, which is one of the barriers that a lot of Virgin Islanders have with moving back home. So we see that technology is very broad. It touches a lot of different industries. And because of that, we think it's a good starting point in terms of finding interesting opportunities, especially for young Virgin Islanders who kind of lean more towards technology anyways, to bring them back home and feel comfortable and have a good quality of life.
I appreciate that. Have you, I don't know that you have this data, but how many new RT Park clients have you developed in the last 2 years, and how many new employment opportunities have you developed? Do you have that data off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, some of it. I know that over the entire, so in total right now, there are around 70 plus tech companies in the territory right now. In the past 2 years, so 2019, I think we brought in 13 companies. 2020, we brought in 14 companies. And this year, our goal is to bring in 15 companies. And we're on track to do that. So we're around 45, close to 50 companies in the last 2-3 years. I don't have the numbers in terms of how many jobs have been created off the top of my head, but just keep in mind that a lot of these companies, because they're tech, they're smaller than traditional businesses, brick and mortar businesses. But at the same time, we've been working on some projects that can bring more advanced technology businesses that can hire, tens, hundreds of people at a time and be catalytic projects. And one of that initiative is called the Catalyst Fund, which would be able to provide gap financing for businesses who can, kind of bring a lot of jobs at one time. A lot of those would be sort of in that advanced technology space. We have been thinking about that, and figuring out how we can make a larger impact in a shorter amount of time, because we understand the instability and the vulnerability and sensitivity of the landscape that we are in now. We want to be able to provide solutions where we can.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, Nathaniel, I saved you for last for a reason. So you told us a little about what you do, but let's dig down a little bit deeper into how your work and the work of your organization and your community has seen a turnaround in a community that's similarly situated to St. Croix, where heavy polluting industry has been the driving economic engine for 50, 60 years. And how does that change happen? How does it affect the people, their health, their economic opportunities, and the environment of the places that you're doing some of this work in? I know that's a lot. You're muted.
Yes. Well, a lot of the work that the Partnership with Southern Equity does occurs around the state of Georgia and in other places around the South. So our landscape has allowed us to see many opportunities and also learn on a national level what is indeed possible. And the first thing that we always have to acknowledge that the change that we're talking about takes time. It does not happen overnight. And it takes a level of resilience from the community, a deep commitment to working together collaboratively in a way to ensure that change can truly happen. The other thing that's really, really important, in particular when we're talking about sustainable development, is that a lot of times people focus on only two of the E's and not all three. We talk a great deal about economy and economic development, or we talk about our environment. But the third E, equity, working to ensure that all people have a chance to benefit from the changes that are occurring in community, is critical, because even though we may come up with great ideas and have access to new technology, innovation doesn't necessarily equate to progress. And so we have to work always to ensure that everyone is at the table, and that we are leveraging all the opportunities we can to ensure that the prosperity that may come and will come, I believe, to St. Croix will not only benefit a small group of people, but be positioned in a way that it will benefit everybody, right? And there has to be a deep commitment to that. And that can not only be represented through community engagement, it has to be represented in budgets, right? Because really at the end of the day, budgets are a reflection of our values, right? And also has to be reflected in policy, and at the center of the work. And so at the Partnership for Southern Equity, we understand that. And so for us, it's not just about outcomes, it's also about working to change the rules of the game. And that happens through many ways. One, of course, is through authentic community engagement, not community outreach, but community engagement. You have to work to ensure that the voices of community are heard and felt as relates to the decision-making process, and also really focusing on, transforming policies in a way that will transform the systems that continuously oppress our communities. And so, for example, and I'll give you a few examples, because, for us, yes, there's an environmental justice component to it, and the disparate effects of pollution on communities. But there's also an asset-based approach to this conversation, Ms. Gerard, that I want to make sure that we elevate as well. As St. Croix transitions towards a clean energy economy, there are huge opportunities for job creation, right? Huge opportunities for many people who don't have access to a livable wage. They have a chance to learn how to utilize and develop and craft this clean energy technology in a way that will provide jobs, real jobs in the community, that will provide opportunities, not only increase the tax base of St. Croix, but also put food in the refrigerators or the cooling systems of the people who live in the communities that are most vulnerable. So for us as an organization, it's more of a broader lens that's really centered in racial equity. So with all that being said, one example in particular that I'm really excited about, which is really more of a policy solution, is that, in one of the cities that we work in Georgia, the city of East Point, they've had major issues as it relates to environmental injustices, as it relates to their industrial community. So much so that in the early 20th century, the Black communities were forced to live next to the industrial sites, and they were forced to smell a horrible smell on a consistent basis, to the point where the community was called Stink Town. And because of that, it affected the health of those communities. Well, today, with the support of the mayor, we finally had an opportunity to pass the first equity and inclusion strategic plan of any city in the state of Georgia, where now there are real approaches that will be done through rezoning and through policy to totally shift and transform the way that industrial development occurs in the community, where light industrial development is taking the place of hard industrial use, where certain places are being repurposed, where now industries that were averse to coming into that community are now being attracted by their community. There's one of the biggest technology firms now in the world is now interested in creating a calling center in that particular community that will pay a living wage. But it's the work around developing a comprehensive approach that was informed by the community, which then is translated into policy change, which then changes the system and creates then opportunities for other people, is the way that we've tried to work to do that. And one other quick example of the work of the Partnership with Southern Equity, we're now working with the Atlanta University Center in Atlanta, which is the largest conglomeration of Black colleges in the nation, to develop a resilience hub in the community that will not only provide solar microgrid opportunities for the university center to be powered, but we're also providing workforce development opportunities by way of that microgrid, as well as battery technology. But we didn't begin there. We started by engaging the community first. Why? Because we believe that the people that are closest to the problem are actually closest to the solution, right? So again, it's not just about the what, it's about the way, and about the way as well. And I think that there's an opportunity for a lot of great things to occur in the community. And, of course, I don't want to belabor this, but there are many examples of how the community can come together and do incredible things. We were also able to expand our public transportation system for the first time in 40 years. Because again, we married people with places and policy, which then realize equitable outcomes. So, I don't want to overtalk, but, of course, there are other national examples, but those are just some examples that are not the perfect example, but there are pieces of those examples that I think will fit well as the leaders of the community, and the community at large begin to think about what type of transition you want to realize, and not just a regular transition in St. Croix, but a just transition. Right. And those are two different things. And I think you all have an opportunity to realize a just transition in St. Croix.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And before we pivot to the Q&A, recently President Biden and the administration have been issuing a lot of statements on revised policy focused on environmental justice and equity, and focused on targeting historically underserved and adversely impacted communities, EJ communities, in as policy, and they're talking a lot of dollars. Yes. In terms of what that's going to look like. So I'm going to ask everybody to think about this question. Ms. Mugden, I'm coming to you. But Nathaniel, what does that look like for a community? I'll say this, that although we live it, we don't talk about racial injustice. Right. We don't talk about inequity. We live it, right, but we don't talk about it because we're a historically Black community. Right. But we live it every day. And here on St. Croix, where we have been the engine for the Virgin Islands because of the petrochemicals, we still have historically always had the highest rate of poverty, right, of any island in the territory. So clearly that's extracted. That's right. Not only is the profit being extracted, but the tax revenue is being extracted. So given this new change in this policy from the Biden administration, what does a community like ours, how should we be thinking? How should we be positioning ourselves to take full advantage?
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate the way that you frame that so much, because I also live in what is lifted up as the Black Mecca of the United States, Atlanta, Georgia. A place that is also majority African American, but yet for many, many years, we were the #1 city for income inequality. Now we're the number two city right behind Puerto Rico now. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I would encourage people to do when they try to move past the challenges of color as it relates to structural racism is to begin to understand that when we talk about structural racism, we're talking about systems. Right? We're talking about systems of oppression that benefit certain segments of the community at the expense of others, right? And so when we begin to put a systems lens on the challenges that we face around racism, then it moves beyond what color you are. It's about a system that is constantly working to affect the Black community and other segments of the community because of the color of our skin. The second thing is, and I'll talk quickly because I want to make sure that the other panelists have an opportunity to share. What has really been excited about the Biden administration is that there has been an executive order, first and foremost, that centers racial equity, right, in the Biden administration and requires the various departments of the Biden administration to begin to think of how, number one, the policies have adversely hurt communities of color, and even more so how those departments now have to work to ensure that skin color is not a predictor of a person's life outcomes as it relates to the work that they are doing in their various departments. That is huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've never seen that before with any president. And so this is a very exciting time because it influences the frame. The second thing is that with Biden's climate action efforts, he's also embedded an effort within that called the Justice 40, which requires now that 40% of dollars that are going towards climate issues, whether it be in affordable housing, transportation, race remediation, energy, water, 40% of those dollars now should have to go into disenfranchised or disinvested communities. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars now that will be allocated to our communities. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to allow those dollars to reinforce injustice? Or are we going to organize to ensure that those dollars get into the communities and to the businesses that need it the most? And so what we've done as an organization with our national partners is to create something called the Justice 40 Accelerator, where we're providing funds to a cohort of Black and brown businesses, nonprofit and for-profit businesses, in order for them to be able to compete effectively for the dollars that are be coming down the pipeline by way of Justice 40. Anybody on the call can check out justice40accelerator.org. You can learn a lot more about it. Unfortunately, we just are in the process of finalizing our list of our initial grantees, but we will continue to do it. And my hope is that for the next tranche of dollars that we'll have to be able to provide to the community, that we will have a nonprofit or a business of color in St. Croix apply for that opportunity to be a part of the next cohort. And that would just make me so happy to see that, because I've had an opportunity to visit St. Croix a couple of times, and it's just been always special to me to have a chance to visit and engage around these conversations. And I hope that through the accelerator, I, and as well as my other partners, will be able to support the great work that needs to be done at St. Croix today.
Well, we really appreciate that, and I'm one of the grant writers, so we'll be talking really soon. So, Mr. Bugden, in terms of this new shift, where EJ is taking such prominence, and equity is the language of the Biden administration, in terms of the EPA's initiatives at a broader level, what are the opportunities? For example, under Superfund, there's the JTI program, the Job Trainings Initiative. But what other opportunities are there for a community like ours that has been adversely impacted, disadvantaged, with health and environmental impacts? Is there anything within the EPA, any funding mechanisms or project development mechanisms that we should be paying particular attention to?
Yeah, I think so. And first of all, let me start by thanking Nathaniel for bringing up the Justice 40 initiative, because that's a really important element. As he said, it's not just climate change money, it's almost all money that the federal government can give out in program grants and other things of that sort. And every agency across the federal government is right now required within literally the next few weeks to provide an initial plan back to the White House saying, here's how we think we can do this for our programs, to make sure that 40% of the overall funding, by the way, it's being measured on a government-wide basis. So actually EPA's funding is a small amount. The really big dollars come in through HUD and the Department of Energy and some of the other agencies like HHS. We are a comparatively small player, but nevertheless, we're focusing very much on this the way other agencies are. And so there are going to be a lot of additional opportunities. The president's fiscal 22 budget, which would, assuming that Congress acts on it, it would take effect on October 1st of this year. And also the infrastructure bill, and there was an infrastructure deal that was just a bipartisan infrastructure deal that was just announced yesterday. Both the budget that's before Congress right now and the infrastructure bill that we hope will be going through Congress include a lot of significant additional money for environmental education grants, additional money for environmental justice grants, which are pretty flexible and have a lot of different opportunities for organizations like yourselves, like yours. And in fact, I'll say that probably the most important thing that I think the question that you originally posed is, what can we as a community do? Well, you're doing the most important thing I think that you can do, which is to organize yourselves in the way you have done, to establish the kinds of collaborations and collectives that you have done. You've got right here, just on the screen right here, you got multiple different organizations that are working together directly, some of the NGOs in St. Croix, with some of the assistance that you're getting from people like Nathaniel. That is really, really critically important, but it's also important to keep your eye on, and we can help in this way, to keep your eye on what are the grant opportunities that are coming forward. So for example, we've been talking to the St. Croix Environmental Association about some possible citizen science monitoring questions that are out there, and it hasn't been resolved yet, but we're making some progress in those conversations, and that's an area where there could likely be funding that could be available under some of these new grants. Brownfields is a whole nother program. I talked earlier about the two big signature EPA programs for cleaning up hazardous waste sites, but another big program, and really important because it has a tremendous amount of bipartisan support in Congress, is the brownfields program, which is appropriate for helping to clean up lesser contaminated sites. An old gas station, for example, that has closed down almost certainly has some contamination in it. And that contamination in the old gas station could prevent a new entity of the types that you're talking about from saying, oh yeah, that would be a suitable location for me to do something. Well, the brownfields program is a good way to look at those kind of smaller sites or less dramatically contaminated sites. The brownfields program, as well as the Superfund program, both have job training elements. Frandel, you mentioned a couple of times, and I'm sorry I didn't respond to your question earlier. I forgot about the job training initiative under Superfund. That is true, that if we have a Superfund site where there is a responsible party paying for the cleanup of a Superfund site, and it involves a lot of jobs, not every Superfund site does, but some do, there's a program to train people in the local community who are undertrained, who may have prison in their past, or they may have addiction problems in their past, or other things of that sort. But setting aside Superfund, our brownfields program has the same thing, and actually has it even, it's much more frequently the job training funding that we provide around the country for environmental job training is much more heavily comes out of the brownfields program. And my colleague Shanine Mitchell is actually on there. She's one of the people who have the mic privilege. So if there's a question later on that want to get into it in more detail, there she is. Hi, Shanine. She can talk more about. It's a very, very valuable program, and we've had enormous success with it. Again, in training the people who need it the most, people who haven't been able to be in the workforce because of addiction problems in the past, or because of whatever else they've been facing. And it's a great program, and Shanine is the one to talk to you about it. And maybe offline, you or some of the other groups or Wayne or anybody might wish to hear more from her about that.
I appreciate that, and Shanine will be getting to you. Sydney, you wanted to take a quick shot at the EJ and the Justice 40 initiatives. And if we could keep it short, because we want to give at least 45 minutes, and I think now I've cut that 45 by 3 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be quick. I just thought about in terms of environmental justice and injustice that happens all over the country and here too, and it can be very, very subtle. And one of those ways, and what Nathaniel, one of the trigger words for me that Nathaniel said was equity. That's a very subtle area that there can be a lot of that's lacking, right? And in doing a lot of research, especially around ag tech and agriculture research for the RT Park, I just came upon the Biden administration really pushing for environmental justice, clean energy, things like that. And then at the same time, and separately almost, providing more support to underserved communities. And there was a nexus for that for me in looking at a lot of articles about how Black and brown farmers across the United States have been prioritized for financing because historically they've been left out. And what's interesting, which it doesn't seem so here locally, the agriculture industry in the United States is one of the most powerful groups of people that exist economically and politically, right? There's a lot of money that flows through there, and a lot of it unfortunately doesn't flow to Black and brown communities. So thinking about that and the projects that we've been working on, we have a project called Tech Village that focuses on creating a campus for ag tech research, agriculture research and agriculture technology. And we're hoping that through that project, we can at least provide, especially through financing opportunities, ways to make that equity deficit less in the Virgin Islands, to at least uplift our farmers, whether it be technical assistance, whether it be direct funding. We're hoping that through that project, we can sort of flow a lot of those resources that way, because we think that if agriculture can be a powerful industry for the United States, to a way of practicing sustainable development in terms of food sovereignty and security. We're hoping that we can contribute to that at home in the community here. And a lot of people don't realize that because and this is the last thing I'll say, a lot of people don't realize that because we rely so much on importing our food, we are in a very vulnerable place. We don't have a lot of power there, which means that there's not a lot of equity, there's not a lot of justice in terms of us determining what our food future is. And, we believe at the RT Park that we should be supporting the local agriculture industry, whether it be providing technologies to make their business more efficient or providing technical assistance or funding. We think that that's the right way to go.
Okay. I really appreciate that. And Wayne, I'm not going to leave you out. I'm going to give you an opportunity, but I'm going to ask you to focus. Is racial equity part of the Vision 2040? Is it a part of Vision 2040? Has that been addressed specifically in that document or highlighted as policy?
Yeah, I would say wasn't highlighted as policy in regard to the Vision 2040 plan, but that was the underlying part of the plan. How do we get everybody in the community to be more prosperous as a result of economic diversity and economic growth? So, I mean, the underlying factors were there, but if you're asking if there's a paragraph that talks to that in the plan, there's no direct paragraph that talks to that in the plan. But again, I mean, that was the whole underlying for creating a plan, trying to diversify the economy, trying to get everyone involved. And again, if you look at the businesses or the industries that we look at, I think it's very clear that the potential for economic prosperity is there for all of us who are residents of the territory.
Okay, but if we don't speak specifically sometimes, it's that, rising water rises all boats, but those that were sunk just can't rise as fast as those that were riding high on the water. So, it's that targeted, intentional planning and investment that I think.
Well, I think some of that is done as we talk about workforce development. How do we develop the workforce? So it's done on the workforce side, not necessarily in the industry side as far as what industry best fits, but the workforce side definitely. I think there's some of that talk about how do we raise everyone up. How do we look at education? Again, if you read the plan, I think the plan is very forthcoming. It's a very honest evaluation of where we are now and where we can be. We didn't leave things out. I mean, we didn't overgloss things where people say things were bad. We didn't sugarcoat those areas. We kind of laid it out there. We felt that we had to challenge ourselves and we had to really admit the issues that we have here in the territory if we want to move forward in regard to that. So it is addressed in a non-formal way, but not necessarily, directly addressed in any one area of the plan.
Okay. Well, we've got a number of questions that have come in. So if there are any that are specific to any of the other EPA individuals on the call, feel free to, Mr. Mugden, I'm sure you'll pick the person. But we have a question, how is it possible to operate an oil refinery in a safe and protective way, with the fact that the operation of a refinery contributes towards climate change that threatens food security, our safety, our health, and our homes. I don't know if that's rhetorical, but take a stab at it.
Well, it probably is somewhat rhetorical because, of course, at this moment, most of what all of us do contributes to climate change. Every time we drive in one of our cars, for most of us, when we turn on anything that's electrical, turn on a light, turn on television, have this webinar, most of the electricity that we're using is still being generated by fossil fuels. So at this moment in time, every one of us is a contributor. And the fact is, the refineries around the world, this one was operating very poorly, but the refineries around the world are still providing the energy that all of us are using for all these purposes. So that's why it's so critical at this moment in time to do everything we can to wean ourselves away. And the infrastructure bill that we just talked about a moment ago has a huge amount of money for electrification of vehicles, for EV charging stations. That requires that people buy electric cars. It requires that they still use electricity. The underlying concept is that if electricity is being manufactured or generated in a central location, it can be much more efficient than if you're burning gasoline in a vehicle or diesel fuel. Number one. And number two, it can be replaced more easily with renewables over a period of time, or hydrogen or whatever else. But this is not happening overnight. Nevertheless, when you're looking ahead to 2040 or whatever time you're looking at, we have to believe and we have to move towards fossil fuel not being the central underpinning of everything that we do throughout the world. So environmental justice and climate justice, by the way, are very closely linked. It is inevitably the overburdened and underserved communities, often communities of color, that are going to bear the brunt of the worst of climate change impacts. It's the people who live in low-lying areas, maybe areas that used to be not so much perhaps in the Virgin Islands, I don't know, but certainly elsewhere in the country, people who live in areas that were swampy or something like that and were considered undesirable land. Those are the areas that are going to get flooded, that are going to get most heavily damaged by rising sea levels. You, of course, you're an island nation. You're going to be affected by rising sea levels. It affects the natural resources that Sydney was talking about earlier. And by the way, I have a personal hope that you continue to have tourism as part of your overall diversified economic package, because I have, with my family, many, many times. I've rarely come down for work, but I've come down many times for personal pleasure to St. John. So I hope I can continue to do that. But your natural resources are affected by climate change. The coral reefs are affected by climate change. The animal, the flora, the fauna, everything is affected by climate change. And that has got to be really important for you. And again, you're a persons of color. You're a community of color to a large extent. But the same is true around the world, and certainly throughout the United States, that it's what we can just by shorthand call environmental justice communities are the ones that are going to be at greatest risk. Everybody's at risk, but they're the ones going to be at the greatest risk from climate change. And that's what makes it so important for these two initiatives of the current administration, the Biden-Harris administration, to be so closely intertwined. You heard it on his inaugural address and in the executive orders that Nathaniel was talking about. Environmental justice and climate change, they're next to each other and they are very, very closely interlinked.
Good. Well, I'd like to follow up on that, since you brought it home to the Virgin Islands and St. Croix. So as we move away from fossil fuels to develop sustainable, renewable energy initiatives, how can St. Croix position itself with the help of the EPA as that laboratory for transition? This is a question one of our partners has given us. How can we partner so that we could be that lab? We could be that that example of a small EJ community that adversely impacted for years, under this new umbrella of Justice 40 and transition to renewable energy.
So if I may, first of all, I think that the University of the Virgin Islands and Sydney, that's where I understand you're affiliated with RT Park. Academia can play a really important role here in being the host for that kind of initiative. And EPA is not necessarily the only, well, we're certainly not the only, and we're not even necessarily the best of the federal agencies to provide the kind of help and guidance and financial assistance that is really going to be important for envisioning and implementing the vision that you're talking about. So, we have a number of programs. We have environmental justice grants that can help. We have the brownfields grants I talked about that may be able to be helping. We have environmental education grants that may be able to help. We have some citizen science programs that we're actually talking to UVI and to the Virgin Islands government about. But other federal agencies have a lot more equity in this space. And I'm talking about HUD block grants from HUD, and I don't even know them all, but I mean, HHS and HUD and a number of the other agencies. My colleague Dave Klisner is on the line, and he may have more to say about this. But EPA can and has on occasion, something we can maybe, a service we can provide is to be a convener to help bring together a number of the other federal agencies like the Economic Development Administration and others, to bring them together and bring them to you in a collaborative way, so that it's one-stop shopping or something more like that. Dave, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Walter. Yeah, David Klisner with EPA Region 2. Just a few observations and a couple of comments. And I see so many seeds of opportunity that have been sown. And, Frendel Chant and St. Croix Foundation applied for and received a technical assistance program under the building blocks for sustainable development. So this is a program out of our Office of Community Revitalization. It's thinking long-term, promoting and funding restoration of historic sites, inclusion of green technologies, flood mitigation technologies, and energy efficiency. So that's one small example. It's not funds, but it's technical assistance. So that's one aspect. Under the American Rescue Plan, this is the $50 million for environmental justice. There were two programs for our Region 2 office that were funded. One of those is our Healthy Buildings program. So in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, funds, this is around $300,000 in funding for workforce development. As the name implies, healthy buildings, healthy homes, lead, asbestos, mold remediation. So it's a win-win for workforce development and making homes and buildings more healthy. And then finally, Walter mentioned other federal agencies. We in Region 2 have been spending a considerable amount of time reaching out to and collaborating with Health and Human Services and Department of Interior. Just last week, we had a very good conversation with the Environmental Justice Coordinator for Interior Secretary Deb Haaland. And there was so much excitement and enthusiasm around bringing to bear a sort of whole of government approach to assisting the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I don't want to take up too much time, but those are just a few of the things. It's collaboration, whole of government, it's technical assistance, environmental justice. There's the collaborative problem-solving grant application that you submitted. Mm-hmm. We are focused on building capacity. You shouldn't have to have a magic decoder ring to figure out how to write a successful grant application, right? So this is what we're here for, to assist with, information on grant writing. What are the deadline or the applications? I see progress just from, if I look at a year ago, I see the successful applications that have been submitted, whether St. Croix, USVI. And so we will continue that, because that's long-term, that's sustainable, technical assistance, grants, in collaboration with other agencies. So I think we're on a positive track.
I appreciate that. And yes, I've been writing grants, and Janine and I have a follow-up conversation on the workforce development grant, because the window for that one was quite narrow. And one of the things, there's a great question that someone in the audience came up, that if you individually had, oh gosh, why did I lose her thing? But basically, if you had all the money, money was not an issue. What's the one sustainable economic development initiative that you would personally undertake? And I'm going to throw this first at Wayne, and then Sydney, and Nathaniel and Walter, if you've got some input. And Walter, I know I go back and forth to Mr. Mugden, but that's my old school.
I've called you Frendel, and I hope that's okay. So please still call me Walter.
That's fine. So Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question in regard to if you had all the money, which one you would throw it behind. I mean, I'm kind of fluctuating between two industries in particular. One is I think I would look at renewable energy, as Walter and everybody else has indicated. Definitely climate change is here. I think there's technologies are changing so rapidly that renewable energy is the way to go. I answered another question in regard to cost and how do you get costs down. And I think you get costs down by really using renewable energies. Commercial battery costs are coming down every day. Solar panels, the technology is getting a lot better, so you can get smaller panels and handle more electricity generation. So I think renewable energy would be my way, and tying them to microgrids. I mean, particularly for island nations, but also something that I haven't really talked about, and is something that we're looking at and working on also, is really the blue economy. I mean, I think there's so much there in the blue economy that you can invest in. And when we say blue economy, it's a plethora of different areas. But I think that is underdeveloped. And if you look at the Vision 2040 plan, we talk a little bit about the blue economy and the Virgin Islands being an area where that blue economy is looked at definitely as one of the science centers for the blue economy. And I think that would be something that continues to grow. As a matter of fact, I'll put in a plug for the US EDA. I mean, they're hosting a conference next week in Puerto Rico in regard to the blue economy, along with Blue Tide Puerto Rico, who they've contracted to work on a regional, they call it the US Caribbean, which is a regional blue economy plan for Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So they're starting to look at things regionally, but also looking at the identity of the Commonwealth and the territory and what separates them apart. So you'll have a regional plan, but it'll identify differences between the two economies in regard to that. So it would either be renewable energy, probably my number 1A, and my 1B would probably be something in the blue economy in that area in regard to that. And I'm a toss up depending on which day you talk to me.
Good. I'm going to toss this to you, Sydney. You know, what would you put the money into?
That's an exciting question for me. So I'm not gonna talk about renewable energy because Walter talked about it and Mr. Biggs talked about it, so we won't belabor that point. But I have two others that I thought about, and I've talked about this before. Agriculture, I think, is a really great space for many reasons. So one, if you invest a lot of money in your local community or your local agricultural community, you can at least promote food security and food sovereignty. So you're not exporting a lot of money, right, to import a lot of food. The other thing is that right now the Virgin Islands imports, I think, like 98 or 99% of our food. And we're really losing out on an opportunity to have a piece of that market in terms of food production, right? So I think in the Caribbean region, the agriculture food production market is like $40 billion. Can you imagine just having a small slice of that and how that could like positively impact our community, positively impact our farming community? I think that and other Caribbean islands are doing this already, and they're leveraging, their specific specialty crops that they have, and they export it to all over the Caribbean, all over Latin America. There are also ways that you can use agriculture and food or plants for other resources, right? So there's hemp. You can create all kinds of things with hemp, concrete, clothes, other types of value add products. So I would probably invest a lot of money in that area because, again, like Walter said, if you're doing it the right way and you're not sort of extracting too much from the soil or from the natural environment, agriculture should be a renewable resource, right? If you are treating your environment the right way. So if we do it the right way, and again, St. Croix, like many people know, and the Virgin Islands in whole, but particularly St. Croix, we hold our environment and our land and just our history in terms of being a breadbasket of the Caribbean. We hold that dear, and we know that we have a lot of potential to be that again in a more equitable way. So I would invest a lot there. And then the second part, which Walter actually mentioned, is research, interestingly enough. So the University of the Virgin Islands is a research institution. It's also a land grant institution. And we really should be investing a lot in the programs to support students who may have lots of very innovative ideas. And if you think about it, if you're the person to come up with an interesting solution, you can leverage that solution to support other communities, other populations, whether it be in the Caribbean or in, the Southern Pacific and the Philippines, who have like similar climates to us, and actually, in sharing your research or solutions, you can, provide a lot of revenue back into your own economy through that. I think that research is a very powerful industry to support, and if we can invest a lot there, you're investing a lot in your students and your future anyways, and that's very supportive of a sustainable economy for me. So the second two would be agriculture and research separately,
Rondell, I just want to point out that you've gotten 2 people so far, and you've touched on 4 of the industries that are in the 2040 plan.
Right.
I mean, so we've touched on 4 of those with just 2 people, and goal number 1 is increasing agriculture. So Sydney really hit the number 1 goal of the plan also.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for that. Nathaniel, you have a thought on what if there weren't one initiative fully funded?
Yeah, I would invest money in community organizing. Because the only way that we're going to get out of this problem is to organize our way out of it. And, as long as the power dynamics in communities don't create the conditions for a new understanding and relationships between the people and the people who make decisions, then you're going to minimize the opportunity for all of the solutions that may come from the community to be fully realized. So for me, it would really be about how do we actually grow influence and power in the community in the ways that are more equitable and inclusive. And then my second piece is really around human infrastructure. I think that, the economic development agenda of the 21st century is not just focused on attracting businesses, but understanding that talent attracts businesses, right? So if you can develop the talent, then the businesses will come. So I would spend a lot of money on really growing the human infrastructure of St. Croix, and that, in my opinion, would attract many of the businesses that we've discussed, as well as focus on, building power in community in ways that are more equitable.
Thank you for that. Because I one of our comments, I think somewhere in the chat, but also in the Q&A is what, in terms of engaging local planners, there are people here that are professional planners, have worked on initiatives, but we continue to export all of our planning and with HUD, there's some, I forget the number, $30 million set aside for planning, under the CDBG DR initiative. How do we, and Wayne, I'm gonna put you on the hot spot here, but how does leadership, how do agencies like the EDA engage with local planners and get local input and have leadership that looks like the people of the Virgin Islands, rather than the houses in New York and DC and all the other consultants that are hovering around us? Because obviously there's a lot of money. I mean, not for nothing, but all of this money coming for redevelopment, FEMA, HUD, and now, how does the EDA create the opportunities and engage with local Black and Brown professionals to make sure that they're participating?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a multifaceted question in regard to that. I mean, one is I think you have to start with education, educating the populace as to what you're trying to achieve and how you're going about trying to achieve that. And I think that's why, again, when we did Vision 2040, we worked very hard in reference to community input and community involvement. I mean, we had virtual town halls, we had virtual open houses, we had surveys, we had diaspora surveys, we had business surveys. We wanted to get as much of the community involved as possible. I think the whole plan was about 180 days to write, and over 100 of those days was just gathering information from the community. So you have to get the community involved in regard to that. And then you have to keep them engaged. I mean, and that's what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to figure out how do we keep the community engaged? How do we continue to move them forward? But as Nathaniel indicated, I mean, I think workforce development, I mean, I think education, those are going to be a big part as to, moving thing and getting people involved in this here. But again, for us, when we did this plan, yes, we used an outside consultant because we wanted to have a really professional in economic development assist us. But we also had many of the subcontractors were local entities here in the territory that were working on this plan. So I think part of it, as we grow into the future and as we try to educate our younger persons is I think we're going to have to develop more internship programs and provide more exposure in regard to youngsters. So when we talk to education, we talk about how do we create a financial literacy course in middle school and high school? How do we get kids exposed to innovation, entrepreneurship in elementary school, in middle school, and in high school? I think I'm seeing a transition with the millennial generation where they're more willing to take a little more risk than maybe my generation was being to do. We were more, I think, service oriented, where we spent a lot of time when we came back home and we went to the government and we wanted to provide services. And government was looked at the safe place to work where, you had retirement, but when you look at the well-being, it's really the entrepreneurs that are driving the economy. The entrepreneurs, I often tell people when I travel in St. Thomas and I'm talking to young people, I say, you look at the yachts in the harbor. It's not, the government workers that own that. It's the entrepreneurs. I mean, and there's so many opportunities now to be innovative, whether you're creating an app. I mean, it doesn't take a lot necessarily to run a business and make money. You have to be just willing to take risk. And I think we need to teach that to our people going forward too. Take risks, continue to be involved in community-wise, educate and train, and we have to just provide that exposure and people will be fully involved.
Well, thanks for that. One of the people in the audience is like, well, it's not about educating the populace so that they can tell you what they want to achieve. It's about educating the populace so they can tell you what they want to achieve, rather than the populace being cogs in the wheel. So it's that, I think Peter, I'm going to call your name.
I concur with that, Frandel. And let me say, that's why, again, when you look at Vision 2040, how it was crafted from the ground up, not from the top down.
Great. I appreciate that. So I'm scrolling. Yeah, Sydney, did you want to say something? And one other thing, Sydney, if you could address whether or not the RT Park has an active internship program with RT Park. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Mr. Biggs was saying in terms of exposure. That's one of the things that I kind of harp on when I talk to the community about the RT Park, and it's through the community is not going to know the opportunities that are available to them if you don't show it to them. You know what I mean? They have to be visible, one, and two, you have to see people who look like you and talk like you in these positions, right? So what we've learned a lot is just building our network for the RT Park in the past 3 years. How many Virgin Islanders are already working in these spaces? We have Virgin Islanders who are VPs, who've been VPs at IBM or at Microsoft. We have people who work at Google. We have people who've been influential in large programs at Amazon. And these are very successful positions and very influential positions. And just knowing that there's a person from St. Croix who works at Amazon in one of those larger positions, at least in the beginning, can let younger people know that that's an attainable goal for me. If somebody who looks like me and talks like me, sounds like me, has come from the same neighborhood as me, can be in those positions. And two, like Mr. Biggs said, and like I said earlier, technology is one of those areas for us that we think is easily accessible, or easy place to enter, having a successful career, a long-standing sustainable career that can provide livable wages and good quality of life. And then in terms of and then the last thing I'll say is that with workforce development, we're trying to work on that. we are working on that through a lot of different avenues. So like I said, we had the youth coding program last year. And again, that's just exposing, students to the fact that they can learn these things at home. They can tinker, they can build, they can explore and play around with these things and really become professionals at it, especially because younger individuals just naturally speak technology. That's kind of their language. In terms of workforce development as well, you talked about internships, and I think I answered one of these questions in the chat. There's a lot of different ways that the RT Park provides internship opportunities. So the first way is through our business attraction program. When businesses from abroad come and establish themselves in the territory and receive tax benefits through the RT Park, part of their agreement, they are required to provide internship opportunities to Virgin Islanders. Historically, a lot of those opportunities have been prioritized to UVI students, but these internship opportunities are supposed to be available to all Virgin Islanders, and that is a requirement of their agreement to receive benefits to be in the territory. The second way is through our Vista Plus program. So that's a job search platform, and that platform allows any company in the territory who has internship opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities in STEM fields to post those jobs so that our students who are in college, our grad students, our rising seniors, our graduating seniors know that they don't have to go away to get that experience in very, to be honest, novel industries in the community. They are here, like they exist here right now. So we're hoping that the job search platform also provides an access point for young Virgin Islanders to have that hands-on experience. And then the last thing that I'll say in terms of, and I think Mr. Biggs triggered this earlier, in terms of taking risks with millennials. We had a business attraction summit in 2019, and one of our keynote speakers was from Facebook, and he said, he was from the Caribbean, and he said in the Caribbean region, one of the things, especially with innovation and technology, what we have to do is embrace change. We tend to sometimes kind of stick to what is safe, and sometimes that can, if you're sticking to what is safe, if you're not moving at all, then you're not progressing. So and that's not just for technology and innovation. That's just in how we advance and progress our communities. You have to embrace change, and sometimes that takes risk, and sometimes you might not know what the other side looks like, but you'll always be in the same spot with the same issues if you don't kind of embrace that sort of innovative, out of the box or creative mentality to move forward.
Great, really appreciate that. We're getting close to the end, and I want to bring us all back to that visioning process. And one of the key takeaways that I've gotten, and I guess it's right up my alley lately, is Nathaniel, your talk about organizing, because organizing leads to policy change. And I think that as politically active as our community is, we go out and we vote, and then we get upset because the people we voted for don't do what we think they should have done. But there's that big gap of we're looking for leadership, but who's driving those leaders? So if you could share with us, what a success look like in terms of an organizing initiative around these types of EJ equity conversations, what that looks like.
Well, I kind of provided a couple of examples. I'll just tell a story of a place, of course, Atlanta, that because of structural racism, never expanded its public transportation system. And you had a county, Clayton County, that lost its transit system. And it became a situation where mothers had to use jitney cabs to get around. And through our organizing efforts by way of an effort that we call the Power of the Penny campaign, We were able to work with the community and the private sector and the elected officials to pass a $13 billion referendum that finally expanded MARTA into Clayton County and expanded our public transportation system for the first time in 40 years. Now, that took deep on the ground education. It took collaboration and coalition building. It took the utilization of data as a way to create a new baseline understanding of what the nature of the problem was and what was possible if people chose to work together. It also took working extremely hard because we knew that in all organizing challenges, there's always someone on the other end that's benefiting from the way things are. You know, how can you find a way to neutralize those voices? And so it takes a lot of work and a lot of research to understand their perspectives, and even more important, who are the people that they respect that you can influence. And that, of course, is called a power analysis. So again, I mean, it's not just about people getting up one day and saying we want change. It takes time. You know, it takes a level of training and understanding about what the problems are and how can you work together collectively to solve them. And so, you know, we've been really blessed to have an opportunity to do that on several occasions. But I would say the one that was the most fulfilling for me, as I think about it, was the one in Clayton County, Georgia, because of it, you know, it brought economic development to Clayton County, which is one of the poorest counties in the Metro Atlanta region, and at the same time, it made children safer and mothers safer because they didn't have to walk on the street anymore because they didn't have adequate transportation or use jitney cabs to get around. So
Great. Just a little deviation. I really appreciate that, Nathaniel. And I think that, you know, when we look at, you know, we rely on a private public transportation system. Jitney buses is what they're called. Other places, you know, our taxi cab system provides public transportation. And at 6 o'clock, it's over. So for those families that work shift, that work nights, that work late, you know, you're on the side of the road hoping somebody picks you up. And as small as we are, boy, can it take a long time to get from point A to point B. And I'm not even talking about our roads. But I really do want to take a quick opportunity to thank Senator Samuel Carrion and Senator Genevieve Whitaker for joining us and for being here. And more importantly, throughout this process, for standing with us and assisting and truly representing their constituents in the crisis period. And we're really looking forward to being able to work with you know, those senators and other elected officials to make sure that their constituents and our communities are safe. And we still got a lot of work to do. And that the economic opportunity is part of their vision, that growth and prosperity becomes part of their vision. I'm hopeful that as you know, we move forward as the EPA, this is my request, Walter, for us to have a meeting about EPA serving as a convener, and so that we can have that conversation with Department of Interior, because after all, they're our top boss. You know, we're under them, and you know, begin that community engagement with the federal agencies as we've had towards building a healthier, safer, economically viable, sustainable community. And I'm getting a flurry of messages, but you know, we've got a lot of issues that we are going to be working on, and with some support from various organizations, and we're out there looking. Community organizing is the next step, and really activating the community because we've gotten a lot done and reached a lot of people in the community with a lean, mean machine. And I have to give big thanks to Deanna James and her team, Jonathan, Essence, Lily, Victoria, and her back office team that we never hear about, Clever and Jennifer, and to Summer Sibley Brown and Jennifer Valulis, who have taken this up, and a very special thank you to Monica Marin, who's always there, Kemet Aman Lewis, and our warrior on our survey and who really got us going, Dr. David Bond. This has been a collaborative effort, and we look forward to growing our community of practitioners. I think that's the right terminology, right? I'm old school, so that we can effectuate the change that we need and the change that we want. And as my elders always say, it's forward, going back 7 generations, looking forward 7. So I'm going to turn this over to one of our fearless warriors, Summer Sibley Brown, for the closing.
Good night, everyone. Hi. Hi, Nathaniel. Hi, Walter. Hi, Wayne. Hi, Sid. And hi, community. Thank you for a wonderful and informative town hall session tonight. As we close our town hall series events, I really want to pivot and echo Deanna and ask a question. Are we the courageous coalition of the willing? Right? Every person on the panel, and I believe every person sitting here, for the majority at this point, many of you has followed us, have joined us, and has helped lead us through navigating this series of 3 town halls, and also attended a listening session hosted by us, all around this conversation of what a thriving St. Croix, one that is filled with healthy people, healthy environment, clean air, clean water looks like, and have earnestly and authentically challenged us to be our best, and also continue to engage in what is next. And as I look around this island, this space, and I think about who built the streets that I want, whose vision is this? Whose vision am I standing in, right? Whose idea of progress do I live with? Whose healthy community is this? The charge for the courageous coalition of the willing is to determine who we will inform next. This is a long journey. It's not filled with quick answers, though there should be some immediate resolve. But we're going to be together for a long time, working across difference. And I was super inspired by Nathaniel and your reference for organization, organizing. Deanna said it. I believe Jen said it. Jen, you said the time is now, right? We are at a unique moment in the history of the Virgin Islands. And as a group of citizens, we have a unique charge. We have the charge to bring environment, economy, and equity to the center of the way forward. We have the charge to engage our leadership and neutralize the power dynamics and ask for what it is we desire as a way of life. We have the charge to determine what living wage is and which industries are priorities, as that was undertaken in Vision 2040. We have the charge to say we want a seat at the table. We have the charge to help our leaders understand that we want to co-create with them, and nothing less than co-creation is acceptable. For a long time, Frandel, you mentioned while we are an active community when it comes to voting, we have defaulted to the vote alone. This time, calls for us to stand in accountability and also hold ourselves responsible to keeping our attention not only to the vote, but to the action. And that's on a local and a federal level, right? We have the charge to say to our nation and our nation's leaders that Virgin Islanders are US citizens and that environmental justices are right. But it doesn't come from just talking about it. This is the first conversation. The end of this series is an invitation to a longer relationship, working groups, conversations, meetings, phone calls, calling your elected officials, education, putting yourself in a space to learn about power analysis, finding out who in the Virgin Islands already does that or knows someone who does that, and throwing yourself, thrusting your attention to us co-creating the space in which we desire for our children's children's children to inhabit. And I'm excited because there are a plethora of opportunities yet to be realized, laid out in front of us by all the participants on the panel and all the community members on this call who have effectively put ideas, thoughts, and challenges to the way forward in this chat. And so I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope I am doing justice to the immense amount of joy and pride and responsibility that the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development, Crucian Heritage and Nature Tourism, the St. Croix Environmental Association, and Virgin Islands Good Food have put into being a steward of part of a conversation and holding and hosting trust, right? But it's not just trust in these organizations. It's trust in our community. It is trust in each other that we will find the way through and we will find our next best opportunity to create the St. Croix we can be proud of and the Virgin Islands that is thriving with both health, economy, and equity. And with that, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna get off my pulpit and just be like, with all my heart, I hope we move forward and I see you all individually very soon to continue this conversation in its next iteration. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. So thank you again, everyone. Look out, we'll have a call out for working group signups. If you're in the audience and want to be contacted, share your email in the chat or contact one of us. We posted email addresses. So again, thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful night, and to our panelists, much appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night. Take care.
You too.
Everyone.